The black SUV pulled up to the old brick building just as the rain started to fall. Inside the car, Rebecca Martinez checked her expensive watch inside. She had exactly 1 hour to spend at this place before her next meeting. 1 hour to smile for cameras, shake hands with a few kids, and get the photos her company needed for their charity report. Rebecca owned 3 successful tech companies and had just been featured on the cover of Business Weekly magazine. At 35, she was known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. She didn't have time for things that didn't make money or advance her career, and visiting children's homes definitely fell into that category. "Ma'am, we're here," her driver said quietly. Rebecca looked at the Sunshine Children's Home through the rain-streaked window. The building looked tired. Paint was peeling from the walls, and the small playground in front had seen better days. A few broken toys lay scattered in the wet grass. "Let's get this over with," she muttered, grabbing her designer purse. The moment Rebecca stepped out of the car, a woman with graying hair and a warm smile rushed toward her with an umbrella. This was Mrs. Patterson, the home's director. She had been running this place for 20 years and had seen all kinds of visitors come and go. "Ms. Martinez, thank you so much for coming today. The children are so excited to meet you," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice genuine despite Rebecca's obvious reluctance. Rebecca forced a smile as camera flashes went off around them. Her assistant had made sure the local newspaper would be here to capture this moment of generosity. "Happy to be here," Rebecca lied smoothly, following Mrs. Patterson through the front door. The inside of the building was cleaner than Rebecca had expected, but everything looked old and worn. The walls were painted in cheerful yellow, but she could see places where the paint was chipped. Children's artwork hung everywhere, bright and hopeful despite the tired surroundings. A group of children had gathered in the main room, their faces scrubbed clean and their clothes neat but clearly hand-me-downs. They ranged in age from about 6 to 16, all looking at Rebecca with curious eyes. "Children, this is Ms. Martinez. She's here to visit with us today," Mrs. Patterson announced. The younger kids waved shyly while the older ones just nodded. Rebecca noticed how they all stood a little straighter, like they were trying to make a good impression. It made her uncomfortable. "Hello, everyone," Rebecca said, her voice artificially bright. She had no idea how to talk to children. In her world, everyone was an adult with something to gain or lose. For the next 30 minutes, Mrs. Patterson led Rebecca around the building. They visited the small library with its collection of donated books, the dining room with mismatched chairs, and the study area where kids did their homework at old wooden tables. Rebecca nodded and smiled at all the right moments while the photographer captured her looking interested and caring. But inside, she was counting the minutes until she could leave. It was during the tour of the recreation room that Rebecca first noticed the piano. It sat in the corner like a forgotten relic. The black paint was scratched and faded, and Rebecca could see that several keys were missing their white covering. One leg was shorter than the others, propped up with old books to keep it level. "That old thing has been here since I started working here," Mrs. Patterson said, noticing Rebecca's gaze. "It's completely out of tune, but the kids love it anyway." Rebecca walked over to the piano and pressed one of the yellowed keys. The sound that came out was weak and off-pitch. She shook her head with obvious disdain. "Why don't you just throw it away? It's taking up space and it doesn't even work properly," Rebecca said loud enough for several children to hear. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Well, some of the children enjoy playing it even if it's not perfect. Rebecca noticed a girl sitting by herself near the window. She looked to be about 12 or 13, with long dark hair that she kept tucking behind her ears. Her clothes were neat but obviously old, and her shoes had been repaired with tape. What caught Rebecca's attention were the girl's hands. They were small and delicate, but her fingertips looked rough, like she worked with them a lot. The girl had been reading a book, but Rebecca could tell she was listening to every word of their conversation. When Rebecca made the comment about throwing away the piano, the girl's hands clenched slightly around her book. Rebecca's business instincts kicked in. She saw an opportunity to show how generous and caring she could be. The cameras were still rolling, and this would make a great story for the company newsletter. "You know what?" Rebecca said, her voice getting louder so everyone could hear. "I have an idea. Why don't we make this interesting?" She walked over to the broken piano and placed her manicured hand on its scarred surface. The room got quiet as everyone turned to look at her. "I'll tell you what," Rebecca continued, a smirk forming on her lips. If any of these kids can actually play this old wreck of a piano, I mean really play it, not just bang on the keys, I'll adopt them myself. She said it like it was the funniest joke in the world. Her assistant chuckled nervously and the photographer kept snapping pictures. Mrs. Patterson's face went pale. Ms. Martinez, I don't think, Mrs. Patterson started to say. Oh, come on. Rebecca interrupted, enjoying the attention. Look at this thing. It's barely holding together. I bet none of these kids even know how to read music, let alone play an actual song. The room was completely silent now. Some of the younger children looked confused while the older ones seemed hurt by her words. Rebecca didn't notice or didn't care. She was too busy enjoying what she thought was her own cleverness. That's when the girl by the window closed her book and stood up. Her name was Sophia, though Rebecca didn't know that yet. Sophia had been at the Sunshine Children's Home for 4 years, ever since her mother died and her father disappeared. She was quiet and spent most of her time reading or helping with the younger children. But Sophia had a secret that none of the visitors to the home had ever discovered. She walked slowly toward the piano, her worn shoes making soft sounds on the old wooden floor. Every eye in the room followed her movement. Rebecca watched with amusement, expecting to see a child make a fool of herself trying to play the broken instrument. Sophia stopped in front of the piano bench and looked at Rebecca directly for the first time. Her dark eyes were serious and steady, showing no fear or anger despite the cruel words she had just heard. May I? Sophia asked quietly, gesturing toward the piano bench. Rebecca's smirk widened. This was going to be entertaining. Of course, sweetheart. Show us what you've got. Sophia sat down on the worn bench and placed her hands gently on the yellowed keys. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then began to play. What happened next would change both their lives forever. The first note that came from the old piano was soft and clear, despite the instrument's condition. Sophia's fingers found their way across the keys like they belonged there, like they had been waiting for this moment their whole life. Rebecca expected to hear Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or maybe Happy Seu. Birthday? Something simple that a child might have, learned in a basic music class. She was already preparing her polite but dismissive response. Instead, what filled the room was the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The melody started gentle and haunting, each note perfectly placed despite the piano's flaws. Sophia's hands moved with confidence and grace, her fingers dancing across keys that should have sounded terrible, but somehow sang under her touch. Rebecca's smirk faded completely. Her mouth fell open slightly as she realized what she was hearing. This wasn't a child banging on keys. This was real music, played with skill and emotion that most adults could never achieve. The broken piano seemed to come alive under Sophia's hands. Even the keys that were out of tune somehow fit into the melody, creating a unique sound that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. It was like the old instrument had been waiting years for someone who could make it sing again. Around the room, the other children had stopped what they were doing to listen. Some of them sat down on the floor, their eyes wide with wonder. The younger ones smiled like they were hearing their favorite bedtime story. The older kids looked proud, like they had known this secret all along and were happy to finally share it. Mrs. Patterson leaned against the wall, tears forming in her eyes. She had heard Sophia play before, but never like this. Never with such passion and power. The girl was pouring her heart into every note. Rebecca's assistant had stopped taking notes on his tablet. The photographer lowered his camera, forgetting completely about capturing the moment because he was too caught up in experiencing it. Even Rebecca's driver, who had come inside to escape the rain, stood frozen by the doorway. As the melody continued, Rebecca found herself really looking at Sophia for the first time. The girl's eyes were closed and her face showed complete concentration. Her rough fingertips moved across the keys with incredible precision, hitting every note exactly where it needed to be. This wasn't luck or natural talent alone. This was the result of hours and hours of practice, but how? When? Rebecca glanced at the broken piano again, seeing it with new eyes. The scratches on its surface weren't just from age and neglect. They were from use. Constant, dedicated use by someone who loved music more than anything else in the world. The piece Sophia was playing wasn't easy. Rebecca had taken piano lessons as a child and remembered struggling with simple songs. What Sophia was playing now was the kind of music that required years of training and natural ability that few people possessed. As the nocturne moved into its more complex middle section, Sophia's hand stretched across the keyboard with impossible grace. Her left hand played the deep, steady bass notes while her right hand wove the melody with delicate touches and sudden powerful moments that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Rebecca noticed that Sophia wasn't reading any sheet music. She was playing entirely from memory, which made the performance even more incredible. Every note, every timing, every subtle expression was coming from somewhere deep inside her. The room had become completely silent except for the music. Even the rain outside seemed to have stopped out of respect for what was happening inside. As Sophia played, memories seemed to flow through her fingers into the keys. Rebecca could hear stories in the music: sadness and hope, loneliness and love, dreams and disappointments. This girl was telling her life story through Chopin's notes, and it was the most honest thing Rebecca had ever heard. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes with a tissue. She remembered the day Sophia had arrived at the home 4 years ago. The girl had been so quiet, so withdrawn. She carried nothing but a small bag of clothes and an old book of sheet music that looked like it had been read 1,000 times. For months, Sophia barely spoke to anyone. She would sit by herself during meals and spend hours reading in corners where no one would bother her. But then Mrs. Patterson started noticing that Sophia would drift toward the old piano during quiet times. At first, Sophia would just sit on the bench and touch the keys gently, not making any sound. Then she started pressing single notes, listening to each one carefully. Slowly, over weeks and months, she began putting notes together to make simple melodies. Mrs. Patterson had tried to arrange proper piano lessons for Sophia, but the home's budget was too tight. They could barely afford food and clothes for all the children, let alone music instruction. So Sophia taught herself, using the old sheet music book as her guide and the broken piano as her teacher. Late at night, when the other children were asleep, Mrs. Patterson would sometimes hear soft music coming from the recreation room. Sophia would practice for hours, being careful not to wake anyone, working through difficult pieces note by note until she could play them perfectly. Now, as Rebecca listened to the incredible music filling the room, she began to understand the dedication and sacrifice behind every note. This girl had turned a broken piano and a book of sheet music into her own private music school. The nocturne was reaching its emotional peak. Sophia's face showed the deep feeling she put into every phrase. Her hands moved faster now, playing passages that would challenge even professional musicians. The old piano responded to her touch like it was grateful to finally be played by someone who truly understood its potential. Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine surprise and respect. In her business world, she was used to being the smartest person in the room. She could predict people's reactions and motivations because everything came down to money and power. But this girl had just proven that some things were more important than wealth or status. Sophia had found beauty and meaning in a broken instrument that Rebecca had dismissed as worthless. She had turned years of loneliness and disappointment into something that could move people to tears. As the piece entered its final section, Sophia played with even more intensity. Her rough fingertips found every key with perfect accuracy, creating moments of incredible beauty from an instrument that anyone else would have thrown away years ago. The music began to slow, becoming softer and more thoughtful. Sophia's hands moved gently across the keys, drawing out every last bit of emotion from Chopin's composition. The melody seemed to float in the air, touching everyone in the room in a different way. Rebecca realized that her cruel joke had backfired completely. She had meant to embarrass these children and show how superior she was. Instead, she had given this remarkable girl a chance to show the world what she could do. The final notes of the nocturne hung in the air like a prayer. Sophia's hands lifted slowly from the keys and she opened her eyes for the first time since she had started playing. The room was completely silent. No one moved or spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to have stopped ticking out of respect for what they had just witnessed. Sophia looked around at the faces staring at her. Then her eyes met Rebecca's, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The girl's expression was calm and dignified, showing no pride or arrogance despite the incredible things she had just accomplished. Rebecca knew that everything had changed in the last 10 minutes, but she didn't yet understand how much. The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, one of the younger children started clapping. Then another joined in and another, until the entire room erupted in applause, but it wasn't the polite clapping you might hear at a school concert. This was the kind of thunderous appreciation usually reserved for world-class performers. Sophia stood up from the piano bench and gave a small, humble bow. Her cheeks were slightly pink, but she didn't look embarrassed. She looked like someone who had just shared something precious with people she cared about. Rebecca stood frozen, her mind racing to process what had just happened. In her 35 years of life, she had attended countless corporate events, fancy dinners, and cultural performances. She had heard professional orchestras and famous musicians, but nothing had ever affected her the way this 12-year-old girl playing a broken piano just had. "Sophia, that was absolutely beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice thick with emotion. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Sophia tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit Rebecca was beginning to notice. "My mother taught me some basics before she died. The rest I learned from her old music book and practice." She gestured toward the battered piano with a small smile. "This old friend and I have spent a lot of time together." Rebecca's assistant cleared his throat uncomfortably. He was clearly wondering what his boss was supposed to do now. After all, she had just promised to adopt any child who could really play the piano. But that had been meant as a joke, a throwaway comment for the cameras. The photographer was still standing there with his camera, unsure whether he should keep taking pictures or pretend this whole thing hadn't happened. Rebecca walked slowly toward Sophia. Up close, she could see details she had missed before. The girl's shoes were held together with careful stitching that looked like it had been done by hand. Her sweater was clean but had been mended in several places. But her eyes were bright and intelligent, and there was a quiet dignity about her that reminded Rebecca of someone, though she couldn't quite place who. "Sophia," Rebecca said carefully, "how long have you been playing piano?" "Since I was 5, ma'am. My mother was a music teacher before the accident. She always said that music was the language of the heart." Rebecca felt something twist in her chest. "What happened to your mother?" Mrs. Patterson stepped forward gently. "Sophia's mother died in a car accident 4 years ago. Her father wasn't able to care for her, so she came to live with us." "And you've been practicing on this piano all this time?" Rebecca asked, looking at the instrument with new respect. Sophia nodded. "Mrs. Patterson tried to find me a teacher, but lessons cost too much money. So I use my mother's book and try to figure things out myself. This piano doesn't sound perfect, but it still works. My mother always said that music comes from inside you, not from having the fanciest instrument." Rebecca looked at the old music book sitting on top of the piano. The cover was worn smooth from handling and the pages were yellowed with age. She could see handwritten notes in the margins, presumably from Sophia's mother. "May I?" Rebecca asked, reaching for the book. Sophia nodded and Rebecca carefully opened it. The pages were filled with classical pieces, some easy and some incredibly difficult. Many had pencil marks and annotations written in 2 different handwritings, an adult's careful script and a child's determined letters. "These notes," Rebecca said, pointing to the pencil marks. "Did you write these?" "Some of them. The ones in neat writing were my mother's. She would write little hints about how to play different parts. The messy ones are mine, from when I was trying to figure out the hard sections." Rebecca flipped through more pages and saw years of work documented in those pencil marks. Simple songs at the beginning of the book, then gradually more complex pieces. She could see Sophia's progress mapped out in the margins. Wrong notes crossed out, timing marks added. Emotional reminders written in a child's careful handwriting. "This piece you just played," Rebecca said, finding the Chopin nocturne in the book. "How long did it take you to learn it?" Sophia thought for a moment. "About 6 months. It was really hard at first. Some of the reaches were too big for my hands, so I had to wait until I grew a little. And the timing in the middle section was tricky." 6 months. Rebecca remembered her own childhood piano lessons, how she had struggled for weeks just to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb" without mistakes. This girl had taught herself one of the most beautiful and challenging pieces in classical music, using nothing but a book. A broken piano and pure determination. "Sophia," Mrs. Patterson said gently,
"Why don't you tell Ms. Martinez about some of the other children?"
"I know she'd love to meet everyone." But Rebecca wasn't ready to move on. She found herself genuinely curious about this remarkable girl for the first time since arriving at the home. "What other pieces can you play?" Rebecca asked. Sophia's eyes lit up. "Oh, lots of them. I know some Bach, Mozart, a little Beethoven. My favorite is Clair de Lune by Debussy. It reminds me of my mother because she used to hum it while she cooked dinner. Would you play it for me? Rebecca, her assistant whispered urgently. We really need to get going. You have the board meeting at 3. Rebecca ignored him completely. Please, Sophia. I'd really like to hear it. Sophia looked at Mrs. Patterson, who nodded encouragingly. The girl sat back down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys again. This time, she played with even more emotion than before. Clair de Lune was gentler than the Chopin, more dreamy and peaceful. But in Sophia's hands, it became something personal and intimate. Rebecca could hear the love Sophia felt for her mother in every note. As Sophia played, other children began gathering around the piano. It was clear this wasn't unusual. The younger ones sat on the floor in a circle, some closing their eyes to listen better. A few of the older kids leaned against the wall, smiling like they were hearing a favorite story. She plays for us sometimes when we're sad, whispered a little boy to Rebecca. It makes everything feel better. Rebecca watched the faces of the children as they listened to Sophia play. These kids had all been through difficult times. That's why they were here. But right now, in this moment, they looked peaceful and happy. Sophia's music was giving them something beautiful in a place where beautiful things were rare. When the piece ended, Rebecca found herself clapping along with everyone else. But this time she meant it. That was incredible, Sophia, truly incredible. Sophia smiled, the first real smile Rebecca had seen from her. Thank you, ma'am. Music makes me happy. I hope it made you happy too. Rebecca realized she was crying and quickly wiped her eyes. She hadn't cried in years, not since her own mother's funeral when she was 16. But something about this girl's story, her determination, her talent, and her kindness had broken through walls Rebecca didn't even know she had built. Ms. Martinez, Mrs. Patterson said softly, perhaps you'd like to hear about Sophia's dreams for the future. Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. I want to be a music teacher like my mother, Sophia said simply. I want to help other kids learn to play piano. Not just the rich kids who can afford fancy lessons, but kids like us. Kids who think they can't have beautiful things in their lives. That's a wonderful dream, Rebecca managed to say. Mrs. Patterson says it's hard to become a music teacher without going to music school first. And music schools cost a lot of money. But maybe someday I'll figure out a way. Rebecca looked around the room at all these children who had so little but still found ways to hope and dream. Then she looked back at Sophia, who had just given her a gift more valuable than anything money could buy. For the first time in years, Rebecca Martinez was completely speechless. Rebecca didn't go to her board meeting that afternoon. Instead, she found herself sitting in the children's home cafeteria, sharing lunch with Sophia, and learning about a world she had never bothered to understand before. The meal was simple: sandwiches, fruit, and milk. But the conversations around the table were rich with stories and laughter. Rebecca watched as Sophia helped a 6-year-old named Tommy cut his apple into smaller pieces, and listened as she patiently answered questions from the other kids about her piano playing. Rebecca, her assistant whispered for the 3rd time, the board is waiting. Tell them something came up, Rebecca replied without taking her eyes off Sophia. Something important. Her assistant looked confused but walked away to make the phone call. Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she had canceled a business meeting for anything personal. But then again, she couldn't remember the last time she had felt like this. Over the next few hours, Rebecca learned more about life at Sunshine Children's Home than she had expected to learn in a lifetime. Mrs. Patterson gave her a real tour this time, not the quick walkthrough designed for wealthy donors, but an honest look at how these children lived. She saw the dormitory rooms where kids shared bunk beds and small dressers for their few belongings. She visited the study room where older children helped younger ones with homework, because there weren't enough tutors to go around. She learned about the waiting list for basic things like winter coats and school supplies, but she also saw something else. She saw children taking care of each other like family. She watched teenagers reading bedtime stories to little ones who couldn't sleep. She noticed how the kids shared their snacks and toys without being asked. These children have been through so much, Mrs. Patterson explained as they walked through the halls. Most of them came here after losing everything, their parents, their homes, their sense of security. But they've learned to create their own family here. How do they stay so positive? Rebecca asked, genuinely puzzled. In her business world, people became bitter and competitive when they faced much smaller challenges. They help each other, and they have hope. Children are naturally resilient, but they need to feel like someone believes in them. That evening, Rebecca found herself staying for dinner. She called her driver and told him to go home. She would find her own way back to the city later. During dinner, she sat next to Sophia and a chatty 8-year-old named Luis, who seemed determined to tell Rebecca his entire life story. On her other side was a quiet teenage girl named Amy, who was studying for her high school equivalency test. "I want to go to college," Amy explained when Rebecca asked about her books. "Mrs. Patterson is helping me apply for scholarships. It's hard because I don't have parents to help with the paperwork, but I'm not giving up." "What do you want to study?" Rebecca asked. "Social work. I want to help kids like us. Kids who need someone to believe in them." Rebecca looked around the table and realized that almost every child she had talked to that day had dreams of helping others. They wanted to be teachers, nurses, counselors, and social workers. Despite having so little, they wanted to give back. After dinner, Sophia invited Rebecca to see something special. She led her to a small room off the main hallway that Rebecca hadn't noticed during her earlier tours. "This is our quiet room," Sophia explained, opening the door. "When kids get sad or overwhelmed, they can come here." The room was tiny but cozy, with soft pillows on the floor and drawings on the walls. There was a small bookshelf filled with picture books and a basket of stuffed animals. But what caught Rebecca's attention was another piano in the corner. This one was even older than the one in the recreation room, if that was possible. It was missing several keys entirely, and the bench was held together with duct tape. "We found this one in the basement when I first got here," Sophia said. "Mrs. Patterson let me bring it up here so I could practice without bothering anyone. Some nights when kids can't sleep, I play very softly. It helps." Rebecca sat down on one of the pillows and watched as Sophia played a gentle lullaby on the broken piano. Even with missing keys, she made beautiful music, adjusting the melody to work around the instrument's limitations. "You really love music, don't you?" Rebecca said when Sophia finished. "Music saved me," Sophia replied simply. "When I first came here, I was so angry and sad. I missed my mother terribly, and I felt like nobody cared about me anymore. But when I played her songs, I could feel her with me again. Music helped me remember that there was still beauty in the world." Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes again. "Sophia, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. When I made that cruel joke earlier about adopting someone if they could play piano, did that hurt your feelings?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It did hurt a little. But I could tell you didn't really mean to be mean. You just didn't understand what this place was like. A lot of visitors don't understand at first. You're very wise for someone so young. Mrs. Patterson says that difficult experiences can make you wiser if you let them teach you instead of making you bitter." Rebecca spent the rest of the evening learning about Sophia's daily routine. She discovered that the girl woke up early every morning to practice piano before the other children got up. She helped with breakfast preparation, attended the local public school, came home to help younger children with homework, and spent her evenings reading or practicing music. "Don't you ever have time to just be a kid?" Rebecca asked. Sophia looked confused. "This is being a kid. At least this is being the kind of kid I want to be, someone who helps others and works toward their dreams." That night, Rebecca lay awake in her expensive apartment, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about Sophia and the other children at Sunshine Home. She thought about their resilience, their kindness to each other, and their hopes for the future. She also thought about her own life. She had everything money could buy: luxury cars, designer clothes, a penthouse apartment, respect in the business world. But when was the last time she had felt the kind of pure joy she had seen on Sophia's face when she played piano? When was the last time she had helped someone without expecting something in return? When was the last time she had felt like she was making a real difference in the world? The next morning, Rebecca did something she had never done before. She canceled all her meetings for the day and drove back to Sunshine Children's Home. Mrs. Patterson seemed surprised but pleased to see her. "Ms. Martinez, we weren't expecting you back so soon." "I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia," Rebecca admitted. "About all the children, really. I want to help, but I want to do it right this time." "What did you have in mind?" Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Mrs. Patterson a list she had been working on since dawn. I want to start with piano lessons for Sophia. Real lessons with a qualified teacher. Then I want to look at getting this place some proper instruments. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous, but the cost… Money isn't the issue, Rebecca interrupted. I have more money than I know what to do with. What I want to know is whether this would really help. It would change Sophia's life, Mrs. Patterson said without hesitation. But are you sure about this? Yesterday you barely wanted to spend an hour here. Rebecca smiled, and for the first time in years, it was completely genuine. Yesterday I thought I was coming here to do a favor for some unfortunate children. I had no idea they were going to end up doing a favor for me. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in the wings of the Grand Theater downtown, adjusting Sophia's dress one last time. The elegant black performance gown had been a gift, but Sophia had insisted on keeping her mother's small silver necklace, the only jewelry she had left from her previous life. Are you nervous? Rebecca asked, though she was probably more nervous than Sophia was. A little, Sophia admitted, but it's a good kind of nervous, the kind that means something important is about to happen. Rebecca smiled at the wisdom that continued to surprise her. Over the past months, she had watched Sophia grow not just as a musician, but as a confident young woman who knew her own worth. The piano lessons had started just a week after Rebecca's second visit to Sunshine Home. She had hired Professor Williams, one of the most respected piano instructors in the city. Rebecca had expected the teacher to be impressed by Sophia's natural talent, but she hadn't been prepared for his reaction. In 30 years of teaching, I've never seen anything like this, Professor Williams had told Rebecca after Sophia's first lesson. This child doesn't just play music. She understands it on a level that most people never reach, even with years of formal training. Within a month, Professor Williams had recommended that Sophia audition for the Young Artists program at the city's music academy. It was a scholarship program for gifted children who couldn't afford regular tuition. But she's learned everything on a broken piano, Rebecca had protested. Surely she needs more time to prepare. Ms. Martinez, the professor, had replied. Sophia doesn't need more time, she needs opportunities. The audition had been held in an intimidating concert hall filled with children who had been taking lessons since they were tiny. Sophia had walked in wearing her best dress from the donation box at the children's home, carrying her mother's old sheet music book. Rebecca had sat in the back row, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails left marks in her palms. She had never wanted anything as much as she wanted Sophia to succeed in that moment. When Sophia's turn came, she sat down at the beautiful grand piano and began to play the same Chopin nocturne that had changed both their lives. But this time, on a perfect instrument, the music soared to heights that even Rebecca hadn't imagined possible. The judges had stopped taking notes and simply listened. When Sophia finished, the room was completely silent for several seconds before one of the judges started clapping. Then they all joined in, something Rebecca learned later was almost unheard of during auditions. Sophia had not only been accepted into the Young Artists program, she had been awarded a full scholarship and invited to perform at the program's annual benefit concert, which brought them to tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice rang out over the theater's sound system. Please welcome our next performer, Sofia Hernandez, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Sophia squeezed Rebecca's hand and walked onto the stage. The theater held over 1,000 people, including many of the city's most influential residents. Rebecca had made sure that Mrs. Patterson and all the children from Sunshine Home had front row seats. As Sophia sat down at the grand piano, Rebecca found her seat in the audience. She looked around at the faces in the crowd, wealthy donors, city officials, music lovers, and critics. None of them knew Sophia's story. They just saw a young girl in an elegant dress. But Rebecca knew better. She saw a girl who had practiced for years on broken pianos, who had taught herself advanced classical pieces using only a worn book and pure determination. She saw someone who had turned loss and hardship into something beautiful. Sophia's hands touched the keys, and the familiar melody began to fill the theater. But tonight, it sounded different than it had in the recreation room of the children's home. Tonight, it sounded like a celebration. Rebecca watched the faces in the audience change as they realized what they were hearing. She saw surprise, then amazement, then genuine emotion as Sophia's playing touched something deep inside them. During the most beautiful part of the piece, Rebecca looked over at the children from Sunshine Home. They were beaming with pride, some wiping away tears. Tommy, the little boy who had sat on the floor during Sophia's first performance, was mouthing the words, "That's my friend," to the woman sitting next to him. Mrs. Patterson caught Rebecca's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." But Rebecca shook her head slightly. She was the one who should be saying thank you. When Sophia finished playing, the audience exploded into applause. People rose to their feet, and the ovation went on for several minutes. Sophia stood and bowed gracefully, then looked directly at Rebecca and smiled. After the concert, Rebecca found herself surrounded by people wanting to talk about Sophia's performance. Word had spread quickly through the theater about the young pianist's background. "Is it true she learned to play on broken pianos?" asked a woman who Rebecca recognized as the mayor's wife. "It's true," Rebecca confirmed. "Sophia is proof that talent and determination can overcome any obstacle." "How did you discover her?" asked a man from the local newspaper. Rebecca paused, remembering her cruel joke from that first day. "Actually, she discovered me," she said finally. "Sophia taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought with money." Later that evening, Rebecca drove Sophia back to Sunshine Home. The girl was quiet during the ride, still processing everything that had happened. "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked as they pulled up to the familiar brick building. "Very happy," Sophia replied, "but also grateful. A year ago, I never imagined anything like this could happen." "Sophia, I need to tell you something," Rebecca said, turning off the car engine. "That first day when I made that joke about adopting someone who could play piano, I was being cruel and thoughtless." "I know," Sophia said simply, "but I want you to know that if you were ever interested, if Mrs. Patterson thought it was a good idea, I would be honored to actually adopt you. Not because of a joke, but because you've become like family to me." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Sophia got out of the car, then leaned down to the window. "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Before you met me, were you happy?" Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I thought I was. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I realize now that I was just successful. There's a big difference between success and happiness. And now I understand what your mother meant about music being the language of the heart. You taught me how to listen to that language again." Sophia smiled. "My mother would have liked you very much. I wish I could have met her. In a way you did. Every time I play her songs, a little bit of her is there with us." As Rebecca drove home that night, she thought about how much her life had changed since that rainy afternoon when she had first walked into Sunshine Children's Home. She still ran her companies and made important business decisions, but now she also visited the home every week, helping with homework and listening to Sophia practice. She had established a music scholarship fund that would help other children like Sophia pursue their dreams. She had also quietly arranged for major improvements to Sunshine Home, including proper musical instruments and funding for arts programs. But more importantly, she had learned that the best investments weren't measured in money. They were measured in changed lives, fulfilled dreams, and the music that filled previously empty spaces in both grand theaters and modest children's homes. A month later, Sophia gave Rebecca her answer about the adoption.